Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of DC's Legends of Tomorrow. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we are picking up where Gideon is explaining her idea, so it is what I thought it was. Gideon isn't actually going to try and stop World War I. She just wants to make evil Gideon think that they are, so if they can go to a fixed point in history, because that'll at least put them in a position where right, we can change something big enough that we know evil Gideon will have no choice but to come to us. That way we take that time and opportunity to steal that Wave Rider, and we can finally find our way back home. And I love Astra being like, oh, diabolical, and she's like, oh, I learned from the best, which now you can't unhear it. It just immediately makes you think of The Boys. Diabolical. That's all I can ever hear that word as now. Damn you, The Boys. Regardless. So now they got to put this plan into action. And I love poor Nate. Everyone just crapping on his drawing and stuff like that. And when we actually get to see it, I'm like, I can see some of what they thought. right, that's supposed to be a field. It looks like water. I see that. I think I saw the hippopotamus, but I'm also like, no, that makes sense. That's the Archduke waving. I can see, And I love that he's like, yeah, my art skills got a little rusty. You guys don't have to point it out and be douches about it. Yeah, they have the plan, and I love that it is a giant mess, which, metaphorically speaking, is just very representative of the Legends. How, scrambled and messed up that looked. It's yeah, that very much fits the Legends of Tomorrow. I should also, maybe she's done other episodes, but I don't know if she has. Maybe she has. But this episode was directed by Maisie Richardson Sellers. She's the actress who played Amaya / Vixen / Charlie in Legends. So I was like, oh, that's pretty dope. Once again, I always like it when people are so, because I know Katie Lotz has directed a couple episodes of Legends as well, so it's always one of those things that I like it just knowing hey, because I think actors who are part of a show always have a certain lens. When you've been a part of the show in front of the camera a couple of times, you probably have a certain view, a certain lens that maybe someone else wouldn't have when it comes to directing an episode of Legends, for example. I think that's just fascinating. Just being on both sides of the camera, I think it's just interesting. Pretensions and all that aside, I like that, obviously, they put forth everything to go to this fixed point in history, and before they can even really get started, some guy comes out, is like, yeah, come in here, and you're like, what? They know they're time travelers, wait, what? I like that they're meeting other time travelers. That's never really come up before. It's oh, you would think that they would bump into other time travelers, considering they've been doing this for a long time. But basically, it's just a bar called the Fixed Point, which almost oh, is this supposed to almost be a play on, because obviously, I was wondering if it was supposed to be oh, this is the vanishing point, is this supposed to be the new vanishing point? It's no, it's just people gather around the Fixed Point, because it's basically been turned into almost a game, oh, everyone takes their turn to try and stop this Fixed Point, but it turns out there's a concept of, nope, time fights back, which I'm like, dude, I'm loving that this concept is initially coming up more and more, just it's almost like time meets Final Destination in certain regards of oh, you can't escape death, that's the whole premise behind Final Destination movies, oh, it's going to find you regardless. So it's interesting. The reason why I'm referencing this is if you've never seen, if your spoilers not caught up on Doctor Who, one of the most recent events was called the Flux event. And they introduced the fact is that time is an actual entity. It's a being that actually exists. It's just been caged up. That's why time works the way it is now. If not, it would be this released beast on the universe type of thing. So I thought that was interesting, which obviously that's not the concept they went with this. I thought that would be interesting timing if it was. But aside from that, my point is, it would make sense in the DC universe. Well, I mean, which isn't to say maybe in some continuity somewhere that isn't technically might not be the case. But I mean, the reason why I'm saying that is because, well, we have an entity like the Speed Force existing in this universe. So would it be that crazy to think that time is a being in itself? Yeah, I mean, it's not even just the Speed Force anymore. There's other forces now. So, got her, her other siblings. So. But what I also like too is how much of an existential crisis Gideon was going through, because she's like, yeah, she's supposed to be this supercomputer, and it's like, how did I not know about the fixed point, which the guy who runs it is like, yeah, it's been here for a very long time. It's kind of only like a word of mouth type of place, like, you know, you being associated with like keeping history together, like of course you wouldn't know about this hot spot. But I think as a being who is supposed to know the ins and outs of time, to not know that there's like a renegade group, just like Pub, where people attempt to try and change one of the fixed points in history. Like, of course, that's going to fly. Like, it's got to bother you a little bit to see that fault, like, fly under your radar. But also finding out, like, wait, I'm supposed to know all there is to know about time, and you're telling me time is a thing that will, like, people who've attempted to try and change the fixed point, stop the Archduke from being assassinated, end up getting killed. Like, time fights back and sets things in motion. Once again, very Final Destination-esque. And so now it's a situation of like, okay, so we got to find out a way to work around this. I love that one of the people that's hounding them, of that trio, is the actor who plays Muhammad. He played Muhammad in Van Helsing, which is interesting because the actress Kia King, she plays Sophie's sister in Batwoman, so it's just interesting that they're in the DC universe at the same time. Also, just interesting timing too, because like obviously like the actress who played Doc as well as Kia King are both in Yellow Jackets. Obviously, the season wrapped up like 2 or 3 weeks ago or something like that at this point in time, and then now you've had just I don't know. I always think that's always interesting how that plays out and works out like that. Which obviously the actress who plays Doc was also in an episode of Supernatural as well. So, and she was also on Nancy Drew last season. There's an even deeper CW connection right there. Once again, I'm going on my tangents. Besides the point, like I said, I went on my huge tangent. I just like the fact is that they're like douchebags, like talking all kinds of like crap. Like I don't get why they're doing that. Because especially as the episode's going on, I'm like, really? Like, all you doing is sitting around, like, talking crap about someone else. Like, why aren't you... You're not doing anything either. Because, I mean, any attempt of trying to do anything will end up with you killed. Because Sarah is literally the only person there that won't get killed. I mean, to be fair, I mean, like, the rest of the team's got superpowers. But it's like, well, without drawing too much attention with using their powers, she is the one that, like, right, won't be an issue. I do like the concept of like how it works, that it's like, right, they have people there filming it so that, right, it becomes public record, and so now they have it, so it plays out and it becomes a part of the timeline the moment it actually, anyone's attempts becomes part of the timeline, and that way they get to see kind of almost quote unquote in real time what happens, but technically they don't. It's just, it's the timey-wiminess of it all. It's just crazy. Like I said, it's understandable why Gideon kind of had the nervous breakdown she did, because she's just like, how do you humans deal with the concept of like this concept of time and stuff like that? She's like, oh no, I know how you deal with it. You drink. So I love that. I also love like these other storylines that they've kind of got competing. Obviously, the whole Astra and Behrad thing was actually obviously super cute. But I love that because Astra and Behrad are off doing their thing, it puts Spooner and Zari in this awkward position, because it's like, cool, like, this is like, oh, we've never had any one-on-one time. It's like, oh yeah, because like there's always been a buffer for like the rest of the team being a buffer, or Behrad or even Astra being a buffer, and now it's like, oh, like, well, yeah, we should hang out. Yeah, like, oh, we could talk about makeup. Oh yeah, or guns. Yeah, like, I love how awkward they are. But eventually they did find something to talk about. It's like, oh yeah, like, they basically like, I was like, oh, I could talk all day about all the people I dislike, and it's like, oh yeah, like, but why was it so hard for us to have a conversation? It's like, I find you intimidating. You find me intimidating. I find you intimidating. And it was really cute. And I think I like what this episode did too, obviously, with the conversation of sexuality, like, you know, Spooner figuring out that she's potentially asexual, because it's like, oh, like, are you... Because I was almost wondering, I was like, oh, is this going to go down the route that she might have a thing for Zari? But it's like, no, she doesn't have a thing for anyone on the ship. You know, it's like, right, you might not be sexually attracted, want sex with anyone, but maybe it's just like, you know, maybe you just maybe you're just looking for a relationship with someone just without the sexual angle of it. And she's like, oh, like maybe I'm ace, which I never knew that was the shorthand for that. Well, it's like amongst, which I don't consider myself well versed in all things sexuality, but it is on the spectrum of sexuality. It is the lane I know the least amount. I guess with just the nature of it, I guess that gives me, I've gotten a general idea. This episode kind of expounded upon that a little bit more. But like when it comes to sex, I don't know that much about asexuality. So, but I thought that's kind of a neat like moment. And it's like, I even love talking, wait, did you just come out to me? And it's like, yeah. And like, oh, I never would have thought that. And even Smoother's like, yeah, never would have thought that we'd be in this position. And then like Behrad and Asher are like, oh, what are you? It's like, no, you kind of had to be there, which is like, I like that. Because this show does a really good job of doing that. Because sometimes there will be pairings you're like, you never expect, like Rory and Ray. That was a pairing you never would, like early on in the show. I never thought that would have been the thing that it would eventually become, you know? So I thought the show does that job. I mean, when you have like a ensemble cast, it makes sense you would do that, like, you know, have these moments. But it just because you never really think about it, like, oh right, Spooner and Zari haven't really had like any like alone like one-on-one time amongst the characters, have they? You know, so I think that was pretty dope. But also like on the same lane of sexuality, like the whole Gwen thing was heartbreaking. Because basically it's like, right, during that paradox conundrum, once again the timey-wiminess of it. If he saves Alan, that means he won't create time travel because it's like, cool, I did my purpose, but his sacred mission, but it's like, but upon doing that, he basically creates a paradox because like, right, if Alan's saved, you never create time travel in the first place to save Alan, but he's already thought about that. He's like, cool, like what I'll do is I'll save Alan and just never let my younger self know that he's alive. And it's like, wait, then you'll spend the rest of your life alone. It's like, yes, that's the thing. I'm like, that's, you know, I mean, that's the, you know, in his mind, at first I was like, I guess that's the sad sacrifice of the time travel stuff. But it turns out it runs deeper. It's religious guilt. I'm like, dude, that's got it. Because for him, he's thinking this is his punishment. Like, you know, obviously he wants to save the man that he loves, but it's like, right, it doesn't matter if anyone else accepts him, because at the end of the day, he feels like God never will. I'm like, I don't know, like, I haven't watched a lot of stuff that's ever really tackled that angle of it. At least, like, you know, dealt with it to some extent. Because even, like, Larry never really dealt with that in Doom Patrol, of, like, I don't think it ever came up. It was mainly, like, the time, like, I mean, for one, he was married with children, plus, like, the time period he's from. Same thing for Gwen, but I don't, it's never come up about Larry being religious, so it's a little bit different in that regard. So, and obviously for, Ava, she's like, I can never understand, like, obviously she's not, like, devoted to God like Gwen is, so, but it adds kind of a wrinkle in that relationship. But at the end of the day, she's like, whoever or whatever God is, like, of course they're going to have some, like, the fact is, you being in love should be, like, the first and foremost, that you being in love with a man in particular shouldn't be a sin. It's just love is love is love is love. It's like, oh, he's like, you're a profound poet. He's like, no, that wasn't me. That was Lin-Manuel Miranda. So, but I thought that was, and I love that, like, he's looking for, like, a handshake, and because he admires her optimism. It's like, right, your belief that there is a way. And she's like, yeah, like, there always has to be. And so it's like, yeah, she hugs him, and she's like, oh, I'm a hugger. And he's like, yeah, I guess I'm a hugger now, too. So I thought that was pretty dope. But yeah, I do, getting back into the main flow of things, well, obviously it all ties in, but the fact is that Sarah makes her attempts, but then, like, her first attempt kind of blows up in her face. Because I was about to say, like, well, no matter what happens, like, despite all, like, the heckling and stuff like that, I'm like, is no one going to comment on the fact is, well, she is healing, so I guess that kind of got a lot of people's respect. It's like, cool, like, she might be failing, but she's not dying, because everyone else gets one shot. She's fortunate enough to have more than one shot, but... Because obviously as a captain, Sarah's like, well, at least I can regenerate. I don't want to take the chance. Even with powers, if someone gets out there and time tries to kill them, then I don't want to be, you know, at least me, I can always heal and come back. Not everyone else. Like, even superpowers aside, maybe things will go wrong and they will they could die. I mean, yeah, like her first attempt didn't go well, getting hit with the step ladder, that ladder and everything. But and I love, once again, I'm a sucker for a time loop episode. Circling back to Doctor Who, which recently had a time loop episode. Obviously, even Behrad references Live, Die, Repeat, which I've still never seen that movie. I've heard nothing but good things about it. I've never I've never watched the movie, nor have I ever read the manga that it's loosely based on. What was it? All You Need Is Kill, if I remember correctly. But circling back to it, what I was about to bring up was the fact is that Sarah froze. Even I was like, wow, we've never seen Sarah freeze. I mean, she's always confident, she's always pushing forward. So for her to freeze in that moment, I'm like, is the thought that oh, time is this entity hanging over your head like a guillotine or something? And I know I've used that reference recently in another review. I don't know what's my obsession with that metaphor. But she froze, and I was like, oh, was there nitpicking getting to her? And it's no, this has been a long time coming. For her, it's ever since we've been on this road trip, which it technically has been a time-traveling road trip. I never thought about that. I mean, the concept of the show has always been kind of been of a road trip angle to it, but even more so being a very literal road trip in this case, especially before they were able to start time-traveling again. But still, the fact is that Sarah feels like she's been stumbling her way through this. She's been telling the team, oh, let's go, we can do this. But it's just because even she doesn't have a plan, because she's just things haven't worked out. She doesn't know what to do next. She prides herself on at least having some form of a plan, even things, but it's now she feels like she's stumbling. And then Nate brings up the fact is of no, we got this, because we're, the thing is, you might be the only one who can do this because you're the one that can't die, but you're not alone in this. And it was, what do the legends do? Screw plans. No one fails like we do. And it's yeah. And Sarah's we broke time before. Let's go break time again. Because I even love the guys are oh my God, you're the legends of tomorrow. I'm hey, your guys are somewhat celebrities. And they're yeah. I'm why did they get, how dare you talk about the people who saved, first and foremost, they've helped save, Sarah was there to help save the multiverse when it disappeared, but you're never going to know that. The fact is that they've broken and saved time multiple times, so that's when I'm so they're aware of what they're, because I guess other time travels know about them, but it's oh, you're this makeshift of failed heroes. Once again, I like them kind of leaning into the concept of once again, that's why Rip took them in, their OG team of legends, because they are the people who had the least impact on the timeline. So if anything happened to them, who cares? And your timeline, you didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But it turns out, obviously, they matter the most, essentially. But getting a little sidetracked there. But it's yeah, I guess, I'm wondering, is that set up for us to potentially meeting other time travelers in the future? Obviously, this is the fixed point here, because this is one fixed point, but there's so many fixed points in history. So it makes you wonder, is this the only fixed point bar, or is there one in other places? Does that guy run multiple ones, or, is this just his, and there are other people who run other ones, or is this the only one of its kind? I'm curious about all of that. But obviously, there turns out to be, there's not just, time isn't actually doing anything. It's actually a person that's stopping people from doing all this stuff. I'm and I love Gideon being happy. She's yeah. She's did I do that right? She's ooh, existential crisis averted, because it's oh cool, yes, I'm not crazy, and there's no, that's no, there is no time thing. It's actually a person doing all this, and whoever it is has the power to freeze time. I'm yo, what is this? So luckily, using Gwen's device, it's a one-shot deal of being able to oppose the power of freezing time. So Sarah crosses path with a person, and with the Shyamalan twist, it's a familiar face in more ways than one. It's freaking Eobard. I was dude, it was Eobard. It was Eobard all along. It's again. I was dude, that's so interesting. I wonder how much communication goes on between the shows. Did they say, did they tell Flash, oh, we're going to use Eobard? It's well, we're going to use Eobard. I don't know. I wonder how, the shows probably don't really, there has to be some overarching thing of, right, they're doing this. So, not unless they both just, it's interesting because like obviously the most recent time we've seen Eobard was in Armageddon. But the fact is he was showing up in his OG face. I was like, oh, that's interesting. At first I was like, oh, that's interesting how they're playing that up, because the fact is that, the last time we saw him in Legends of Tomorrow, it was him. Well, the reason why I'm pausing is because there was Crisis on Earth X, and he looked, to be fair, that was a different Eobard. Yeah, because that was Eobard from that, if I remember correctly, or was that their Eobard? I don't remember now. I think that was their Eobard. That wasn't like Earth 53 or 52's Earth X's. It's been a while. I need to go back. I want to rewatch all the crossovers again. I've rewatched all the previous ones multiple times. Crisis on Infinite Earths is the only one I haven't rewatched multiple times. Intentions and all that aside. But I was thinking, the last time he was in the Legends of Tomorrow was when he was with the Legion of Doom with Malcolm Merlin and Damien Dark, who recently made a reappearance in Armageddon as well. So how very befitting. But the fact is that he's with his OG face again. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I was like, huh. And then at first, even Sarah's like, wait, where's your powers? He's like, it's a long sword. I was like, oh, so this is definitely post you losing your powers. Because I was like, that didn't seem like some speedster stuff, of you freezing time. It's like, no, he doesn't have his powers anymore. And he's going toe-to-toe with Sarah. It's like, you think you can beat me in a hand-to-hand combat without your abilities? No, sirree. And she lays him out. And it turns out he's here because it's his job, his mission to keep this fixed point going, because it's about protecting the timeline. So, now this is where we get into that timey-wimey stuff of okay, I don't know for sure where this is. Okay, so this is Eobard, but this is the Eobard from Season 2, the Legion of Doom Eobard. This Eobard doesn't have his powers because when he was taken, they stripped him of his power, but they gave him a new mission. He has to stay here, basically repeating the same day over, this same point in time. This is his way to protect it, is to be here over and over and over again. And, it's not just about repenting for his crime. He does believe, no, I am a believer in this can't happen, because if this fixed point is stopped, it destroys the very fabric of time and space, because everything could come unraveled. And I think that's so interesting, because that was also the interesting thing, too, because they've dealt with stuff that has to happen, but they've never, went head-to-head with an actual fixed point, if I'm not mistaken. This was the first time really going toe-to-toe with the fixed point, and obviously what that all entails. Maybe they have, because I know there's certain things in, you're not supposed to change in time, because they want to keep the timeline the same in certain regards, but I don't know if there's anything this is, like I said, them going head-to-head with a fixed point for the first time. I think they've been they've been adjacent to fixed points before, but I don't know if they've ever gone head-to-head with it. But Eobard and her sit down and talk about everything, and she explains why she needs this. It's we're not here to change and stop the war. We just need to adjust things enough so that we're able to draw in this evil AI, get our ship back and everything. So, but the reason why I'm a little scatterbrained here at the end. Sorry. The reason why I was bringing up the fact is it seemed interesting that they, the timey-wiminess of it, because I think he's a paradox. I mean, to be fair, he's always been a paradox. He shouldn't be around for the very beginning. That was the whole, skirting around that anyway. But part of me is okay, so this Eobard is separate from the Eobard that has come after Barry subsequent times. So, is that supposed to be indicative of this Eobard is his own thing, that he's not going to eventually escape from this, somehow get his powers back, and continue down the route to go after Barry, and eventually end up where he is at the end of Armageddon, having his powers stripped away? Because I thought that's what this was supposed to be I went back to my OG face, Barry and them and Team Flash ended up taking my powers. It's no, that's not what ended up happening here. It ended up being a separate Eobard, so... But I think maybe Because I guess it still keeps it in continuity of like, right, this is where he is. He's stuck at this point forever and ever. Like I said, not unless they give him his powers back. And he goes like, nah, bump that. I'm about killing Barry Allen. So I'm going to go fulfill my destiny and be, end up where I end up at the end of Armageddon with no powers and stuff like that. And locked up in... but I think this is their way to kind of keep him active in another way and, utilize him in a way that he was used in Legends and befitting of this. But yeah, he does seem like he is a different person of like, yeah, this is my mission. It's like, fine, I can open up an opportunity for you. You got 40 minutes. If you go a minute over, I will try to kill you again because it's my job. I have to protect the timeline and everything. Which, like I brought up about the fixed point, the bar, does that mean there's other agents like Eobard scattered throughout time at other fixed point, or is this like a very pivotal fixed point that is like this one in particular would be the one that if anyone messed with, it would unravel everything? Or I think any fixed point probably would, but is some more important, or do some have larger waves than others? Is what I'm curious about. I didn't talk about it either, but I do like that trio ended up helping out Sarah at the end in the and I love the chant, take a chance on Sarah Lance. But like they admitted, like, right, we kind of act like that when we're threatened. It's like, no, it's something we're working on in group therapy and stuff like that. I was like, oh, that's cool. But yeah, like they gave her one of their tickets so that she had an opportunity to do it. She's like, yeah, not going to need all three, just going to need one. So it all works out. But so it's like, right, they gotta, hell, they even gave them comms and stuff like that so they can stay in contact. But when it's all said and done, it's like, right, Sarah's like ready to make her move, and she was able to stop the assassination. So it was like, okay, so where do we go from here? So now Gideon's going to be arriving. They've got one shot at this. There are no do-overs, as Sarah says. So I even love Gideon. Classic, you doing the classic kissing thing of like, oh, lean your significant other back and kiss him. And she's like, I always wanted to do that. He's like, me. And Gary's like, me too. So Gwen and her are going to be holding down the fort. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.